Hi, I'm Will Bruin, and I was just recognized as a Seattle Sounders legend. Now I get to do voice reads for the Sounder at Heart podcast network.
Here we go. Come on! Hey, O'Shan! Let's go!
The Seattle Sounders have done it! MLS Cup winners! The Sounders rule the region! Seattle Sounders is campeón! All creatures great and small.
Rothrock going to collect it. He does just about. Runs into the advertising awning. Low to our left. Ball goes in. Oh, what a cross! And what a goal!
Where's my copy?
I got a bunch of them in the car. I'll get you some.
You're handing them out for free already.
How many
cost on them?
$50.
I'll Venmo you.
This episode of Nos Arietes is sponsored by Full Pull Wines, a Seattle-based wine retailer and proud sponsor of Nos Arietes since 2011. Full Pull was founded in 2009, is based in Seattle, and is owned and operated by longtime Sounders supporters. They offer the best boutique wines of the world to members of their mailing list, with special focus on their home, the Pacific Northwest. Welcome back to another episode of Nos Arietes on the Sounder at Heart Podcast Network. Today is Monday, July 20th, and we are recording after, this is the Monday after forget it. It's the Monday after the worst game. So we've been, in Sounders history, we have been sitting on this for 4 days. Hopefully, me and Nico and I recorded a podcast right after, in which we did a lot of unloading, but 4 days later, it's still pretty raw. Aaron and I were just talking in the pregame for, 15 minutes.
Yeah.
And we realized we should be recording a podcast because that's what we came to do. So Aaron, welcome back. I'm so glad that we get to finally discuss a game, and this is the game we get to discuss.
Yeah, it feels great. That really kind of sums up the whole vibe around the game, right? Like, we waited for so long. Everybody was so excited. Biggest crowd since 2022?
No, not 2020. It's the biggest league crowd since 2024, but one of the biggest crowds since COVID, for sure. A top 5 league game crowd since COVID.
Right. The vibes felt really good in the stadium. People, I
got
think
chills on the field. I was on the field. I got chills.
Yeah, people had great expectations for it. Last game on the grass, a chance to erase any lingering bad feelings about the way the things were going before the break, and then they go out and do that. And it's, I've watched the Sounders lose at home to the Timbers. I've watched the Sounders lose at home pretty lopsidedly to the Timbers. Mm-hmm. That was something completely different. I mean, that was maybe the worst performance that I have ever seen from the Sounders in a league game. I think the way I described it to you was, it was like a 2011 CCL game where one team looked like they were a much more talented team in midseason form. And that was the Timbers, who are not a more talented team, who are not anywhere closer to midseason than the Sounders are. But that's how it felt. It just felt, so the field felt so tilted towards the Timbers. And yeah, I'm still pretty upset about it. And I think there's plenty of blame to go around. I don't think this is, I think there's been a lot of focus on whatever thing is the thing you're most pissed off about, this, the Sounders organization right now is where the ire is focused. And I totally understand that. But I think as we talk through this, we're going to come to the conclusion that actually we can be pissed off at a lot of different things as a result of this one.
We can walk and chew gum.
Right.
Or,
right.
And we're all out of gum, I guess. I don't know. That's not the saying. But it was, I should say also, thank you to our sponsor, Full Pull Wines. I freestyled the intro, which I usually don't do on our show. And so, of course, I left that out. But anyway, thanks, Paul, for sponsoring this wonderful podcast. But it was, I think, if we want to get into it, the worst performance, at least since the infamous refund game of 2010.
Yep.
As you probably remember, the Sounders lost that game 4-0. and I'm actually looking at the box score of it right now. Eerily similar. Jovan Karofsky scored in the 22nd minute. It was only 1-0 at halftime. And then between the 52nd and 67th minutes, the Galaxy scored 3 more goals. And it was such a bad performance that after the game, Joe Roth promised fans that they could have a refund. And then the Sounders spent basically the better part of the next year or two figuring out how to actually give refunds, because they didn't actually give you got a credit back on the way they ended up doing it was you got a credit on your season ticket account. And there was all these debates as to whether that counted or not. And I think most of the people in the organization felt like that was a mistake and they shouldn't have done it. And they probably were right.
They were definitely right. Yeah.
And the reason was because but amazingly, they had avoided another 4-0 loss at home since that game. It had been 16 years since the Sounders had lost by 4 goals at home. And I got to tell you, I don't know if people would have appreciated it, because I don't know if people were in a mood to appreciate anything, but it would have been something to give, for someone to come out from the front office and just say, this was unacceptable. Look, we're not going to give you a refund, but we understand that we have to be better. And all we could do is show you that we're going to be better. So hopefully we beat Austin on Wednesday or whatever. But we haven't heard anything from the front office. Yeah. I guess I'm not shocked by that. And I don't know if I really blame them, because on some level, the thinking is, what can we really say? Because look, we shit the bed, and it's up to us to clean it up. Like, we have to, as the team, we have to show that we are capable of cleaning it up. But the other reality is that they don't play a home game they have their next 4 games on the road, 3 league games, and then a Leagues Cup game is Toluca on the road. It could get really ugly, like really, really ugly.
Yeah, it really could. I mean, and beyond like the front office not coming out and saying anything, I guess there's a possibility at training somebody will show up and say something. Sounders have not posted on Instagram since pregame. The Sounders have not posted on Blue Sky since pregame. I don't know how active they're
not on Twitter either. I checked.
Yeah.
They did not post on Twitter.
That's loser shit, man. That is loser shit. Post the score. Post the score.
Well, they did post the score.
The game happened.
They posted the score, I think.
They did not post the score on Instagram.
Okay, they did post it on Blue Sky at least. They think they posted it on Twitter. But it is loser shit. And then just to sort of make matters worse, and I don't necessarily, again, I don't blame them so much for this, but it is optically awful to then the next morning people to wake up to, oh, by the way, those 2 international roster spots that we've been holding on to, we traded those for $250,000 in GAM each. So we got $500,000 more of GAM, which isn't a player.
Right.
No, and of course those trades were made before Friday, but they announced, and they didn't actually even, they waited to announce them until the receiving teams announced them, and they were like hours. I don't think the Sounders actually made the announcement until hours after, because I think our post beat them to it. And so it does sort of give off this. Oh, and then by the way, just to throw one more log on the fire, it comes out that Daryl DK has signed with Orlando City, and the Sounders had the discovery rights on him, so they're getting $75,000 in GAM,
right,
maybe another 75 after that. So here, at the very least, what the Sounders have done, purposefully or not, is they've set the bar now. Look, Daryl DK is what we could have had, theoretically.
Yeah. And I personally think that that's going to end up being a bullet dodge, but it still doesn't look great, And I think the lack of any sort of statement, any sort of acknowledgement of anything that's happened is part of a trend with the Sounders over the last few years, where Adrian used to be a guy that talked to the media all the time. Haven't heard a peep from him, right? Craig had some media availability a few weeks ago. That was the first time in how long he's had any media availability?
A long time.
And that was when the Sounders hadn't played for a while, right? And they didn't have any games on the horizon. Like, it was at a very convenient time, I feel like. So, I mean, this club sold people on a vision for a different kind of club, right?
Yeah.
And they lived up to that for a very long time, and people bought in, and they have not been living up to that. But the people are still there. People are still coming out. Yes, attendance is down, it's still second in MLS. It's still, over 30,000 at most games.
And also miss me with the, but butts and seats aren't as high. Like, right. Trust me, there's more butts. I would be willing to bet almost anything that the Sounders are second in butts and seats in MLS, just as like they are second. Right. Hell, they might be first, because first is Atlanta. And watch a Atlanta game, there are a lot of empty seats in Atlanta.
Right.
But go on. I'm sorry, I cut you off.
Well, and also the checks are clearing, right? Like you can do givebacks for credits and everything, but the Sounders have the money. It's in the bank account, collected interest, right? People are still bought in, and this and the club is not living up to any of the stuff that they have said that they were going to do to differentiate themselves. Like we don't have the same level of transparency. We don't have the efforts to be a big ambitious club, and I don't just mean on the field stuff, I mean off the field stuff as well. The game day presentation is not what it used to be. The game day environment isn't what it used to be. Instead of 10 years ago, Adrian talking about like, yeah, we think we can fill this whole stadium one day, they're talking about moving to the suburbs to a 20,000 seat stadium and saying like, well, the train station's right there. It's not what people were promised, and they're taking the fan base for granted. And this game is an example of why you can't afford to do that indefinitely, because something like this is going to happen and people are going to get fed up with it. Like stuff like this is very frequently a turning point in people's fandom. I know this is somebody that used to be a diehard Mariners fan. People have their limits, right? We're not as bad as the Mariners were when I gave up on them, but for some people, this is probably enough, right? So how are you going to respond? Maybe going radio silent for 4 or 5 days is not the best way to respond.
Yeah, I mean, like to your point, the Sounders have been far more transparent in the past. They had much bigger ambitions than they were in the past. All of this has sort of caused people to dig up some old stuff. I just want to read something from a quote that Adrian Hanauer gave in 2015. And it was back when the Sounders renewed their lease at Lumen Field. I believe it was the first time their lease had been up. And there was some discussion about them maybe building their own stadium. There had been some discussion even of them building a stadium at where is now Memorial Stadium, or what used to be Memorial Stadium, which will soon again be Memorial Stadium. But anyway, he says, look, this is what he told to the Everett Herald. Look, every sporting franchise on the planet dreams of their own facility, and we're not different. But the little bits we poked around over the years made us realize that, first off, from a location and amenity standpoint, CenturyLink Field is where we want to be. It used to be called CenturyLink Field, in case you forgot. And secondly, this is where it's good. And secondly, building whatever size stadium we might decide. And thank goodness we didn't build a 20,000 seat stadium in the suburbs 7 years ago.
Yeah.
The cost of the stadium was going to be too much to overcome. We didn't want to go to the public looking for money. And then another quote in there, he says, and we think we can continue to grow into CenturyLink. We think we run our business right. We can average 50 or 55,000 fans a game, and eventually 67,000 fans at each game. So the idea that it somehow made sense to build another stadium that holds 50,000, that's expandable to 65,000, just defied logic to a large degree. Don't get me wrong, we'd love to have a grass field, but spending $500 to $700 million just to have a grass field doesn't make sense.
Right. and I know that the justification for not caring about filling the stadium anymore is like, well, MLS takes a huge chunk of the money. That's not. I don't know that
they've never used. By the way, they've never used that as an excuse.
I'm sure.
That's like people have speculated on. I don't even know if that's like how much of that is a real like deterrent.
Right. I think it just got hard. I think.
I mean, it got
keeping
hard.
the momentum
up
got hard. Yeah.
And But one thing, and this is something that I think is going to get a lot of attention in the next, the transfer window is open for about 6 more weeks. And I am in the process of trying to write a column in which I talk about this. So forgive me if you have already read me saying some version of this. But there is a big vote coming up this summer or in the fall. Every 4 years, or it's not every 4 years, but the fourth year of every GM's tenure, they are up for a public vote. And this is the year that Craig Weibel is up for a retention of confidence, no confidence vote from the Alliance. That means anyone that is a member of the Alliance, that's all the season ticket holders, that's people who they can buy an Alliance membership if they want to without even being a season ticket holder. they get a vote on whether or not Craig Weibel keeps his job. And I'm not going to sit here and throw Craig Weibel under the bus and say it's all Craig Weibel's fault. I know a lot of people would love me to do that. And I actually think Craig has done a reasonably good job given the constraints that he's on. But what I can't do is defend the idea that he deserves to be retained if we go another summer without making a notable move, because it's not so much about him. It's about sending, I think what we're going to hear a lot from people is it's not about Craig. It's about sending a message to ownership. And I don't know that this is the most effective thing to do or the most productive thing to do, but I do think there's going to be a big movement to vote no confidence in the GM. And it's not fair to Craig, I don't think, but he's going to end up being the one that takes the bullet on this. And it may or may not reach quorum. It may or may not pass, but it's going to be a much closer vote than it's ever been. And if the Sounders don't do anything this summer, and I think that may be true, even if they're doing okay standings wise, like even if this turns out to be a blip on the screen in terms of the way they're playing, I think people are just getting to the point where they are just fed up with the same old thing. And this is the one tool that fans have other than saying, I'm not going to renew my season tickets. And I'm sure I've been hearing this a lot. I don't know how common it is, but I know there's a lot of fans saying like, I'm not renewing my season tickets until I start seeing some action. And I don't necessarily think I don't think that's a particularly likely tool that a lot of people are going to exercise. Like they're going to make their decision based on something else. But this vote is a real thing that has some real potential to be a major, major black eye, if nothing else, for the Sounders. Yeah. And I am not, I don't even know. Again, I just hope that there's some rethinking in the front office about what the budget is, because I think that's where it starts. It starts at the budget making process. There is not money in the budget, as far as I know, to make a real impact signing. And hopefully this result got some people's attentions and said like, okay, look, we can't just keep plugging along. And again, it's not even about if they had signed a DP number 9, that probably wouldn't have avoided this result. But there's just this total malaise, I think, that has started to seep in. And the lack of outside signings is a really good avatar for that malaise, or the cause of that malaise.
I think sometimes you want to feel like ownership is trying, right?
Right. Exactly.
I mean, what are you going to do? Go into the locker room and yell at Snyder Brunel or whatever? Like,
right.
I guess you're going to send him out in front of the media. I guess he's going to be the guy that has to do that.
Yeah, of course.
But I'm not saying that they need to go and buy out a DP. I'm not, I guess I wouldn't be opposed, I suppose, or trade a DP or do whatever, but it's been so long since they have spent meaningful money. Yes, they bought PDLV and before the 2024 season. Great. That was a reasonably affordable transfer. And it hasn't worked out so far. Guess what? Like, sometimes moves like that aren't going to work out. And you're going to have to eat $6 million and not get what you were hoping for. That's being the owner of a team.
Right.
That's part of what goes along with it. A team that has increased in value from what was the original
$30 million
fee? $30 million,
roughly $1 billion now.
Right. So there's money there, right? I get that you want to run it, in the black year over year, and that they lost money during COVID. The franchise value has increased by like $970 million over time,
which is a lot of money. Actually,
it's a lot of money. It is a lot of money, and they've never done a capital call with owners, as far as I know.
As far as I know, that is correct.
These are very rich people that are in the ownership group. I know that Adrian, as the majority owner, is not super wealthy by MLS owner standards, but the resources are there to go make a signing. And I think generally Adrian could point to the fact that, the Sounders are in the playoffs every year. They won a Continental Trophy last year. They've made deep playoff runs. They've been really good at producing players from the academy, and their strategy has worked. And look at all of these DPs that have gone for big money and been, busts or haven't been impactful. We just don't think the return on investment is there. And then you go out and you lose 5-1 at home to the Timbers. right? And that just becomes a much less compelling case.
Right.
And I think even when you could plausibly make that case, there's still a reasonable counterpoint of, but this is the entertainment business, right?
Exactly.
But now you've got, this is the entertainment business, and also all of our kids got totally horribly exposed against a pretty bad Portland team at home.
Yeah. And I think what's, and I guess this gets back to, getting down to what really happened on Thursday. And I think one of the things that is the most frustrating and the most baffling is that it would be one thing if the Tacoma Defiance got run through like that, or the Sounders just had, they were missing like all their starters it was a rotated game, or guys just needed rest. They were too tired or whatever. This is in the middle of a really busy stretch. No, it was coming off a 7-week break from games.
Right.
And they had probably 8 of their normal starters, 7 or 8, depending on how you want to count it, of their normal starters were in this game. And the guys that you would expect to step up and lead, guys like Nuhu, who, by the way, had the captain's armband, looked like absolute crap. Jackson Reagan looked like absolute crap. This is a guy who made it to the All-Star team, looked completely out of his depth somehow. Tino Lopez, look, I'm not going to beat him up too much because he's one of the lowest paid players on the team, but he has looked great in a lot of outings. He looked like absolute crap in this game. Kalani Kosarienzi, another player who he has played a lot for the Sounders. He's looked really good at times. He got totally exposed for all of his weaknesses in this game. Hassani Dotson, people are saying he was the worst player. I don't agree. I thought he was maybe the least, in some ways, bad player. He was not good. I don't want to overstate things, but I did not think he was quite as bad as people were making it out to be. But he was not, he was a veteran that you should be able to rely on, and he was not reliable in this game. Snyder Burnell has looked absolutely amazing. He's someone who we have talked about having a higher ceiling than Obed Vargas. Looked like absolute crap. Jesus Ferreira, I actually thought looked okay at times. Paul Rothrock looked okay at times. Albert Rusnak, for the most part, looked like crap. He had a couple decent plays on set pieces where he looked better, but he was way too inactive. He was a non-presence on defense. He was not doing enough to get on the ball. Basically looked like crap. Jordan Morris, the starting forward, he had 5 touches in the first half. I have to assume he picked up his injury way before the half, but he looked like he looked so bad that it's completely making me rethink what I thought he was as a player. Because if that's what he's capable of right now, they need to get out of the Jordan Morris business ASAP, because he looked absolutely dead in this game.
He looked unrecognizable. I mean, it's no secret that I have been a huge supporter and defender of Jordan. He's my favorite Sounders player of all time. I have to, for my own mental well-being, I have to assume he got injured like 5 minutes into the game, because and if not, like, I saw him 6 weeks ago play, and he didn't look like that, right? So if he didn't get, what were they doing over the break? If he didn't get hurt 5 minutes into the game,
that is a great question, because it defies logic that they looked this slow. And if you go back and you look at the goals that they gave up, how easy all of the goals were. They're just bouncing off tackles. There's guys ghosting into space. There are unmarked players. There are easily converted passes. The press was non-existent. It was unrecognizable to even what we've seen from the Sounders at their worst this year. Like, where did this performance come from?
Yeah, I mean, we've been, I think, very critical of the front office so far. I think it's very fair to ask questions of Brian Schmetzer and getting this team prepared for this game. That team did not look like a team that was up to play who's the most Montreal, right? Let alone the Timbers, let alone coming off a 6-week break, trying to capitalize on some enthusiasm for soccer, a nice big crowd on a Thursday night. They looked less prepared than I may have maybe ever seen them look, certainly during the Brian Schmetzer years. And Brian gets a hugely long leash with me, right? Because stuff like this just has not happened under him, but it clearly happened in this game. Tactically, they looked totally incoherent. Didn't look like there was a real cohesive plan. The Timbers looked like they knew exactly what they were going to do and exploited them, and there were no adjustments. Everybody, like you said, looked slow, looked unprepared. They, in large part, looked like they had never played together. And, you know, as we all know, the Sounders don't have a ton of turnover. So these guys have definitely played together.
Right.
And it's just, it defies logic, right? Especially when Brian came out and made a pretty emphatic statement right before the game about how prepared they were and how ready they were to play.
Yeah. And how he doesn't have to give any big speeches because the guys know what's on the line here.
Absolutely.
And it looked, unfortunately, eerily similar to the way the U.S. played against Belgium in that game. And I'm not the first person to make that comparison, but it happened on the same pitch. It was the last time, local soccer fans saw a team they were rooting for, most likely. And so the comparisons are apt. I just wanted to throw a stat out there real fast because it's something that we haven't talked about a ton. But look, we have oftentimes defended the idea that the Sounders do not have to spend a ton of money in order to be competitive, because that's what MLS has set up, a system where you don't necessarily need to be among the high spenders. In fact, there's almost no correlation to spending and winning. Sounder at Heart has been around in one form or another since 2009. In 2026, though, we make a pretty significant evolution when we go analog. Yes, that's right. In the year of our Lord 2026, we are publishing a real-life magazine. We're calling this thing 4, as in Sounder at Heart 4.0, but we're stylizing it as IV because we absolutely love Roman numeral. And if you want to refer to it as IV, that's cool too. The first issue has a comic book style cover that was hand-drawn by local artist Kevin Newber. Features by Tim Foss, Susie Rance, and Charlie Boehm, a statistical deep dive by Kat Bush, a Q&A with Brian Schmetzer, a column by G. Willow Wilson, and photographs by Noah Reif, Max Aquino, Mike Russell, and Jane Dershowitz. I could not possibly be more proud of the work everyone put into making this, and I think you're going to absolutely love it. If you'd like to get your hands on one of these limited edition copies, we're currently selling them for $15 on our website. Get yours now. But there's this idea that you have to sort of stay in a certain range to be competitive. And the Sounders on their salary basis have done that for the most part. Like, even though I think they're 19th or something in spend, the distance between them and 10th is, pretty marginal. And it's like really how much you're paying your designated players. So I don't get too wrapped up in stuff like that. But there's a pretty illustrative stat, and we have talked about this before. It's just not something that we've never talked about, so save it. But this is like a pretty good illustration of the problem. So if you go onto Transfer Market, you can look at a range of dates as to how much money each team has spent. And basically, since the start of the 2022 season, the Sounders have spent about, call it $9 million in transfer fees. And that, by the way, includes money that they've spent in GAM. That's not just cash. That's including GAM trades. That is the lowest amount in the 30-team league. And by the way, there are a couple teams that have not played in all of those seasons. And the next, they've spent more than $3 million less than the next lowest spending team, and that's the Vancouver Whitecaps. And look, that's just too big of a gap. But then look, even go beyond that. It's another $3 million to the 28th team, and then another $2 million to the 27th team. The Sounders down at 30 have spent about a third as much as the 18th highest spending team.
Right.
They have spent a third as much as the 18th highest spending. That is a insane spending gap. That
it is. Yeah.
That you just can't, like, look. The Sounders, I'm not going to sit here and say they need to be the highest spending team. I'm not even going to say they have to be a top 10 spending team. But you can't get lapped 3 times by the 18th highest spending team in transfer fees. That is an outrageous amount of money that you are just refusing to spend on transfer fees.
Yeah, it's crazy. And Vancouver, the next lowest spending team, has a guy making a ton of money on the team. Right. That has raised their ceiling quite a bit, I'll add. I mean, they were a very good team before Mueller got there. They are the best team in the league running away now with him there. And if the Sounders had spent the same amount of money on transfer fees, but they had 3 DPs making $4 million producing at that level, I would not really care as much. But they've got a middle of the pack salary team. They're not paying their DPs very much. Their DPs aren't producing, which is the most important thing. If PDLV were healthy, if Jordan were healthy, if Albert were healthy, because they're all hurt, I think it's fair to say, and they were all producing as much as we know they can, I don't think anybody would care. But they're not, and the problem is that we know they're not going to do anything to fix it. We know they're not buying anybody out.
People start getting really. I think it's not so much the spend right now. I think that's driving people crazy. It's that we, like you and I think for a long time, we're pretty adamant that, look, the Sounders aren't spending, but it's because they've instead of spending on transfer fees, what they've done is they've signed Ladero to extensions. They've signed Rui Diaz to extensions. They've signed Rusnak to extensions. Like they it's like you can argue that these were maybe ill-fated moves, but they made sense when they did them. And I think you could say same thing about the Jordan Morris extension. Like, it's now looking pretty bad, but at the time, you got to go back to 2022, I believe, after the 2022 season, when he signed his contract going into the 23 season. He was good in 23 and 24 before he hit his escalator for, in that made him a DP in 25. So the Sounders got 2 non-DP seasons out of him, and then he produced like a DP, and so they had to pay him like a DP. Like, I'm not going to get worked up over that. But what I think really drives people crazy is that it's like, okay, so you made this mistake. At least when you're out of that contract, or maybe you can get yourself out of that contract, you're going to go out and spend more money. And there's just no indication that the Sounders are interested in spending that money. And that's where it starts. Right. That's where people, I think, really start to lose their minds of like, what are we investing in here as fans? Like, it's all fine and good for you to tell me that you don't think transfer fees are equated to points, but our cost of going to games is going up all the time. Where is that money going? Like, the Sounders got $10 million in cash winnings last year from the Club World Cup and Leagues Cup and everything else. Where did that money go? Because it apparently didn't go back into investing in the team. And I think that's where people start to really get frustrated. And that's all sort of window dressing. I mean, look, the game this week was bad. It was really bad. It was the worst game. But I think what happens is that gets piled onto all this other frustration that's been building and building and building over time. And you end up creating this sort of toxic environment, which is where we are right now. And I don't blame people for being really upset. They're upset with us. They're upset with the Sounders. They're upset with everybody because it's just not the way it's supposed to be.
No, it's not. And in addition to the prize money, right? In addition to all of that, they've sold a bunch of guys. They sold Obed Vargas. They sold Josh Atencio. They sold Reed Baker Whiting,
Danny
George
Leyva,
Mungu,
just
Danny
sold
Leyva.
Cody Baker.
Right. Like, you're moving these guys. And look, I don't have any problem with any of it. That's the thing. Every move that they make, like you said, makes sense in isolation. But they are completely unwilling to change course at all with anything they're doing. It's just like, well, the academy is for, the guys that can break through, and then the other guys we move on. Okay, what's part 2 of that? Like, the Ajax model is not just selling guys. It is selling guys and then going out and buying impact players to put your team over the top with the money that you make. It's not just selling the dudes. We don't know whose model that is because they play in like the 3rd division somewhere and they have this great academy and it's the only way they can stay in business. Is that really what you want to be?
Well, and I think that's the other thing is that we've had some people sort of bring this up, that it's like championship rosters aren't built just with homegrown players. And that's right. No championship roster is built just with homegrown players, but the homegrown players are supposed to be a foundation that you can then supplement with better players. Like, that you still are going out and signing DPs. You're not just promoting guys from within. And sure, if you happen to have your franchise all-time leading scorer and he ends up being a DP, you can live with that. But you got to have 2 other guys who are from outside the organization who are lighting it up. And hey, on some level, I think Pedro de la Vega was actually a pretty good gamble. Like, when he's healthy, you can see why the Sounders felt like they were getting a bargain. But when he's not healthy, you have to, that puts a lot more pressure on what else you're doing. And look, Albert Rusnak has been really productive and he's been, for the most part, pretty good. But like, coming out of this window, the things that we were hearing, which unsubstantiated kind of rumors at this point, but supposedly what Craig Weibel was telling fans when they'd ask is, it looks like we'll probably sign Albert. We'll pick up Albert's DP option, and I think that's mainly because I don't know that Craig believes he has money to go out and get a new DP, and that's crazy.
It's
That is
insane.
crazy.
It is completely insane. I don't. The only thing that makes sense, and I don't even know if this makes sense. The only thing that makes sense is Adrian is going to sell the club in the very near future and doesn't want to spend any money he doesn't have to. That's the only way this could retroactively make sense to me. And based on the way he looked after the game on Thursday, he didn't look like a guy who was checked out and getting ready to sell the club, right?
No, I mean, he's look. I'm not sitting here trying to stand for Adrian or anything. Adrian, if he wants to defend himself, he's welcome to come on the show and defend himself. But I will say this for him is that he cares. He cares a lot. And
absolutely.
And that's sort of where the disconnect is most frustrating is that I think he has talked himself, his rational brain has talked himself into believing that he doesn't have to spend transfer fees, and spending transfer fees is just sort of wasting money. But look, man, you can't just go on like this forever. At some point, you got to spend money to buy talent. Like that's a truism in around the world. You can beat the system so many times. Adrian is a poker player. He understands odds. He understands all this stuff. And look, you can beat the house on a short-term basis. You cannot beat the house over the long haul. And right now, the Sounders have sort of talked themselves into, we can beat the house forever. That's how we built this. And that's just not sustainable. At some point, they're going to have to spend some money. And that's, look, again, I'll say it again. That money wasn't going to save them from Thursday's result, but hopefully it's a wake-up call that this is what can happen when it starts to fall apart. And unless we're ready to just let it all fall apart, we got to start spending some money.
Yeah, you're not going to always be able to draft Christian in the, with the 11th pick or whatever.
Right. That happened once in 2015, by the way.
The all-time leading scorer is not going to be born and decide he doesn't want to go play in Germany when he has options and would rather play for you. Like, they lucked out in so many ways. Nico and Raul, two of the most successful DP signings in league history, right back to back. All of their, every single hand hit for an extended period of time, but there's no such thing as Sounders exceptionalism, right? There's nothing innate. There's nothing in the water. There are lots of things organizationally in the DNA of the franchise that are special and important, but they're not enough to just assume everything's going to be okay forever.
Yeah. I mean, it's not all money, but money is going to at least show people that Sounders
we're trying to fix this.
They're trying to fix it, And this window right now could not possibly, frankly, be more important. I know that there's probably some people listening to this saying, look, we're not going to overreact to one result. We're not going to overreact to one chain of results. This is a long-term project. And what I have to say is that this is a wake-up call. You're not responding to one thing. You are coming to your senses. That's hopefully what's happening here, is that this is not about one game. It's, look, I think if the Sounders had tried to get away with this window of doing the thing that they have been doing the last 4 years, which is to say we tried really hard to find signings. We talked to a bunch of players we really like, and wouldn't you know it, they were all just barely out of our reach. And we weren't gonna compromise our beliefs in order to bring in someone that we didn't totally believe in. And while I think there's truth in all of that, the reason it's true is because there wasn't enough money. If you had more money, some of those players probably would have been willing to sign with you. And and so hopefully there's more money. And look, if Sounders fans want to withhold their renewals, which, man, how insane is it that the day that the renewals launched, they had this performance?
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I mean, it's like a symbol. It's a signal from God, right?
Almost, yeah.
It's crazy. And to your point, it's not just this game, right? It's getting totally blown out by Cruz Azul in the Champions League last year. It's blowing a 2-0 lead in the playoffs up a man against Minnesota last year. It's not being able to get past the Galaxy in 2023, even though I think they were the better team. It's always finishing
just
in a position that puts you up against it in the playoffs.
Right.
You know, there's always a stretch of time every season where everybody's like, oh, the Sounders are back. And it's never long enough for anybody to be fully convinced. And
right. Like, I'm sure that what they'll do next is they'll go on like a 7-game winning streak, and then we'll say, oh, wasn't this silly? But that does sort of paper over the bigger problems, right? Which is like they can't just keep kicking the can down the road and saying, look, like, and I guess this is the thing, is that there's no guarantee that spending a bunch of money is going to that's going to ensure that this kind of performance never happens again. But the spending the money is what keeps people, again, we can't repeat this enough. It's a symbol from ownership that they care, that they get it, that they want to entertain the fans. And part of entertaining fans is changing who is in the movie. You know, you can have, look, the Fast and the Furious was a really successful franchise, and they did it mostly with a core of the same characters, but every movie had new guys in it. I think, I'm pretty sure. I'm pretty sure that's true.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it was always like you always had Vin Diesel, I guess, as Christian in this analogy.
Sure, exactly.
But there were other guys. There were other
like
guys.
The Rock was in a bunch, wasn't he? But not all.
I think
of them.
So. No, not all of them. Paul Walker,
Ludacris
obviously,
is I think a person that was
not
in it.
In all of them. Ludacris was in one. Yeah. It is. I mean, it is that, right? And it's also like point. It's. I do, and it's also it is the showing people you care, and it's also the show people you're interested in somebody else than, you know, the 26,000 people you know for sure are going to renew their season tickets.
Yeah,
like show that you want people coming to games again, that you want to maybe one of these days open up the upper deck again, right?
Yeah, and this it's worth reminding. We haven't really talked about this, but part of the reason that there was 35,000 and change at this game was the Sounders wanted to make sure that every seat that was returned found its way into another, like a first time on us person's hands. And then they also did this Soccer's for the People promotion where tickets were $20.26. And that's most of who was up in the Hawks Nest / Green Zone thing. So what you did, and by the way, I think to qualify for that 2026 price, I believe you couldn't have been it's like you had to have not gone to a game for a year or two or something, like, so that was like your enticement to come back. So on top of the, call it 25,000 diehards who were there was another 10,000 or so people, a lot of whom were experiencing the Sounders for the first time in person, or for the first time in a while in person,
or who had left and come back.
And this is the performance that you put on. And look, I thought to the Sounders' credit, the what is it called? Eternal Sounders Circle of Legends. Was honestly, I like that ceremony. I had no problem with them doing it. I know some people have been like, oh, we shouldn't do that stuff before Timbers. It's always distracting, blah, blah, blah. You know, no, it was well done. I loved having Casey talk. I thought it was a great moment when the Timbers Army was like booing him the whole time during his speech. And then he, at the end of it, kind of gave this like, let's go kick their asses or send them back down to Portland or whatever. I love that stuff. I think that's part of the entertainment of the entertainment part of it. And yeah, you got to live up to it. You have to live up. That's what this is all about. Like, if you are a great team, you should be able to taunt the opposing fan base and get away with it. That's sort of what being like the Sounders is like. If you want to be a great team, the Sounders claim they want to be a great team. You got to be able to handle that stuff.
Yeah, if you were too soft to have a pregame ceremony before you play your rivals, there's a bigger problem, right? It's not the pregame ceremony's fault. For sure,
it is not the pregame ceremony's fault. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It was a bummer because it was shaping up to be a magical night. It was like I'm not being hyperbolic when I said when I was on the field during sort of like the boom boom clap and the tifo coming down. It was great. It was the energy was so good. I thought this pregame ceremony was good. You know, in some ways, it was nice to see that the Sounders tried.
Yeah,
because they haven't done that enough. And one of the things we asked Casey about was how being able to have a circle of legends is a symbol that the Sounders take themselves seriously as an organization. And that's true, obviously, but it can't be an excuse for not doing all the other stuff. You know, like it's all fine and good to have a circle of legends. And by the way, it should have permanent signage. The fact that it's on a digital signboard is absolutely ridiculous. And if the Sounders wanted to, they would fight and claw and figure out a way to put something that at least looks like permanent signage up there, even if it wasn't literally permanent when the Seahawks are there. But I digress. And the Sounders wanted they sometimes do a good job of the sort of ancillary stuff, the stuff they can do one off, and they do a good job of taking care of former players. You know, I think they had a big dinner with Jimmy Gabriel's family and Siggy Schmid's family. You know, Siggy's wife or Siggy's widow was there. All of his kids were there. Kurt Schmid was there. He's the GM of RSL. So it was not a small thing that he had come in for this game, because I believe he missed RSL's game sometime around, I don't know if that's totally right. But anyway, the fact that Kurt was there being honored for his dad when he had another team to run is not a small thing. Casey Keller showing up there and giving time and doing all this stuff. Look, that's all. I don't want to take away from the Sounders doing all that stuff well, but that's not enough. It's that and spending some money. It's that and making sure that every Sounders game feels special. It's that and showing your fans that you are as mad about this result as they are. And I just don't see that.
No, I don't either. I mean, hopefully by the time training is over tomorrow, this is outdated already before most people have had a chance to listen to it. But it's just, it just feels like, I don't think I've ever felt this negative about the team, right? Like people have absolutely for years accused me of being a Pollyanna. And I was right a lot of the time, right? Like I was right to say, I think we should wait it out. Like they won a lot of trophies.
Yeah.
They like for years, people, before Ladero were signed, people said they're not going to sign anybody. They could have had Blanco. They didn't sign anybody. They need somebody. That this team is bad. Then they go get the best player in team history. 2018. Oh, Adrian doesn't want to pay another transfer fee. He's cheap. They should have signed somebody in the winter window. Then they go and get Raul. Right. This just feels different. I don't have any faith that they're going to do that anymore. And I think if there was ever going to be an impetus for them to change course and re-examine some things, this would have to be it. And I really wish I had more faith that it would be.
Yeah. Well, that's probably a good place to wrap it up. I don't know what else we have to say about this game. The Sounders do have another match on Wednesday against Austin FC. Austin FC, another great opportunity for the Sounders to collect some points. Austin FC is not very good. Then after Austin FC, I believe they play the Philadelphia Union, another team who does not look very good at all. So, the Sounders could improve Philadelphia's on the road. I don't think they've actually won. They haven't won in Philadelphia very often, but it's a bad team. And then they get chance for revenge.
Philly has not won at home though this year. So
is that real?
Yeah. They've won once on the road. They have 3 draws and 3 losses at home.
Great. That is, I'm sure that won't make for a fun stat for anybody. That definitely will not bite the Sounders in the ass. And then they get a chance for revenge against the Timbers. And, I want to give Snyder Burnell a little bit of credit, because as bad as he looked, whether he wanted to or not, he was one of the people that came out and talked to the press. after the game, and he he had a good quote. I just want to read the quote that he had, and I really do hope that there's something to this. He says, "We definitely need to reflect and make sure this never happens again. This was embarrassing towards the fans, the club, Washington. We do have a chance to make sure when we go over there to Portland, we take advantage of the opportunity and we kill them over there." Like, hey, I appreciate the confidence, and I really hope that he gets an opportunity to show that a little bit. I wish it wasn't left to Senator Brunel to be the one giving that quote, but I appreciate that he did. And I don't know. Let's hope that the Sounders can turn this around. But I just want to reiterate, it's not necessarily about just results on the field. It is about sending a message, and it's about more than that. And, I feel like I said this last year too, but like it's not acceptable to just keep kicking the can and saying we don't have any money to spend. Find some money. They got to spend some money, man. They got it.
Yeah. And don't make perfect the enemy of good. Right.
Right.
Like,
yeah, exactly.
We're past that. Especially if you're not adding a DP, take a swing. Take a swing on a guy. Take a swing on a U22 if you need to.
Right.
5 points from your last 6 games is just not good enough. It's just for a team that was talking, back in April about being a Supporter Shield contender. 5 from your last 6 is just not gonna cut it. You've got
5 from your last 6 when all 5 of those games. All 6 of those games, 4 of those 6 games were at home. Yep. One of them was at Sporting Kansas City. Yep. And look, that the Sounders have just dropped way too many points that they should be winning. They've played too poorly in too many games. It has to get better. Like they got to be better than this, and it can't be just sort of like, we'll get them next time. It's like we're beyond, we'll get them next time.
We are. Yep.
But all right, well, let's get out of here, Aaron. At least I feel like we got to vent a little bit more. Hopefully people
it was good. It was good to actually feel like I was venting in a productive way.
Yeah. So nice. I think we solved everything.
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you to our sponsor, Full Pull Wines, by the way. It's always nice having her back. And I'll just remind everyone that we are in the middle of a membership drive that goes through August, I suppose. This is the rough year anniversary of Sounders at Heart going independent. And if you want to keep supporting us, please consider becoming a member. And if you want to really support us even more, consider becoming a member at the supporter level or above. That gets you access to our Discord, which I don't think there's ever been a period in Sounders at Heart history with more comments than the last, the day after. Like that Friday was absolutely bonkers. I don't know exactly how many comments there were, but it was almost impossible to keep up with. So I don't know if you're into that, it's the place to be.
Yep.
Anyway, all right, let's get out of here. I am Jeremiah Shan signing off for Aaron Campo and our producer, Lickett. This is Nos Adietis, part of the Sounders at Heart Podcast Network, and we'll catch you next time.
Let's go, Sounders.